Imagine a world where your refrigerator basically hallucinates an apology to a fictional character,
Okay.
or where garage hackers synthesize custom mRNA cancer cures for their dogs over a single weekend,
Right.
and where silicon brains suddenly ace the absolute hardest, most abstract mathematical proofs on Earth in just a 12-month sprint. Welcome to April 2026.
Yeah, it's honestly a staggering landscape. The reality we're looking at today fundamentally alters the trajectory of human agency.
Completely.
Because for years, the artificial intelligence industry operated under what we called a capability overhang.
Like massive world-altering models locked away behind corporate APIs.
Exactly. And mostly being utilized as glorified text generators, right? But what we are witnessing this month is the absolute catastrophic collapse of that overhang.
The theoretical is just violently crashing into our deployed physical reality.
It really is.
But before we map out the exact coordinates of this collapse, I actually want to step back for a second and talk directly to you, the listener, because I was looking at the sheer volume of digital content being generated right now, and the numbers are they're staggering.
Oh, absolutely. It's a flood.
There are currently over 3 million new videos being uploaded to YouTube every single day. 3 million.
Which is just an unfathomable ocean of algorithmic noise.
Right. So the fact that you have navigated through all of that and found our little channel here, I mean, it's a literal miracle.
It really is.
And it's a miracle that deserves at least a thumbs up. And the best way to preserve that connection is by subscribing. If you tap the bell for updates, these deep dives will be delivered directly to you.
Plus, it fundamentally helps others find these conversations.
Exactly. We know a lot of you are fans of Dr. Alex Wisner-Gross and his contributions on Peter Diamandis' YouTube series, Moonshots. So we put an immense amount of time into synthesizing this level of intelligence for you. We promise to keep you entertained throughout, but we are definitely not going to skimp on the intelligence.
Never.
So yeah, take a second to subscribe. Thank you.
Because the signal-to-noise ratio in today's media environment is hostile. Finding the signal requires intent.
Which brings us to today's mission. We are diving deep into the latest dispatch from the Innermost Loop, which is curated by Dr. Alex Wisner-Gross.
Always a fascinating read.
Oh, definitely. And this deep dive is titled, The Singularity Just Shifting Gears, Why April 2026 Will Change Everything.
A bold title, but totally justified.
Yeah, the dispatch is dated March 29, 2026, and it starts right at the absolute bleeding edge of digital compute. We're looking at a localized intelligence explosion arriving this April.
Driven by a massive triple release.
Right, we've got GPT 5.5, Claude 5 Mythos, and DeepSeek V4 all hitting at once.
And the underlying economics of these models have just completely decoupled from traditional software development.
It's a whole new paradigm. The dispatch notes that massive training runs are now just, quote, table stakes.
Yeah.
Which really risks making frontier intelligence entirely unaffordable for the average user.
Yeah. It creates immense pressure on rate limits and pricing.
Yeah.
And we really have to define table stakes in this context because the scale, it breaks normal human intuition.
It's not just a bunch of guys in a room with laptops anymore.
No, not at all. We are no longer talking about a team of engineers renting a little cloud space. Training a frontier model like Claude 5 Mythos requires synchronized clusters of hundreds of thousands of next-generation GPUs, drawing power on the scale of a mid-sized nation, and running continuously for months. The capital expenditure just to simply begin training is in the tens of billions of dollars.
Tens of billions, just to start.
Right. And when the physical infrastructure required to create intelligence becomes that expensive, the amortization of those costs dictates how it gets deployed.
Meaning you can't just give it away for free.
Exactly. It means the absolute bleeding edge of AI, the systems capable of, say, simulating novel pharmaceutical compounds or managing national logistics grids, that becomes a centralized, highly guarded resource.
So the natural assumption there is that we're on a trajectory toward severe AI inequality. Like this techno-feudalism, where only a few mega corporations and sovereign wealth funds hold the keys to apex intelligence.
Which is a valid fear, but the dispatch highlights a massive countertrend running perfectly parallel to this centralization.
A compression game.
Yes, the compression game. And it's beautifully exemplified by OpenAI's parameter golf competition.
I love this concept. The objective is to fit the most capable language model possible into a 16-megabyte artifact, trained on just 8 H100 GPUs.
Which is a tiny fraction of compute compared to the frontier models.
Right, and the current leader of this competition is claiming performance 42.7 times better than the baseline.
It's incredible.
For you listening, Squeezing a functional reasoning model into 16 megabytes is like compressing the entire Library of Congress into a matchbox, but still being able to instantly query any page with perfect semantic recall.
That's a great analogy. And the physics of that compression are where the real engineering breakthroughs are happening right now.
Because you can't just delete data to make it fit, right?
No, exactly. You achieve a 16 megabyte footprint through extreme quantization and weight pruning.
Walk us through what that actually means.
So you're essentially reducing the precision of the neural network's weights, moving from, say, 16-bit floating point numbers down to 2-bit or even 1-bit representations.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, while using techniques like low-rank adaptation to maintain the logical architecture of the model's reasoning capabilities.
So it's still smart, it's just using way less memory to hold on to that intelligence.
Precisely. And what parameter golf proves is that optimization is an unstoppable force across any scale. The frontier models push the absolute ceiling of raw computational power, discovering new paradigms of reasoning. But the compression track ensures that those paradigms are distilled down to operate on the ambient hardware of our daily lives.
Which means the intelligence isn't just centralized in a giant server farm somewhere. It becomes ubiquitous. It's on your phone, in your watch.
Everywhere.
But I want to ask you about this dual track. If massive models are becoming unaffordably expensive, but compressed models are getting exponentially better, which path actually defines our future? Like, are we heading for AI inequality or ultimate democratization?
It's going to be both, honestly. The frontier track will solve the impossible problems, climate modeling, deep physics. But the compression track is what will actually touch human lives daily. It's the democratization of the breakthroughs discovered at the frontier.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But we really need to look at what happens when this hyper-optimized intelligence is aimed at a closed domain system. The most startling data point in this dispatch, at least regarding raw capability, is the mathematics saturation.
Oh, the USAMO scores.
Yes, the USA Mathematical Olympiad. Last year, state-of-the-art models were scoring below 5% on the 2025 exam.
A massive failure rate.
Right. And then, just 12 months later, GPT 5.4 just scored 95% on the 2026 exam.
It's almost hard to comprehend that leap.
For context for the listener, the USAMO isn't just about multiplying really large numbers. It requires profound geometric intuition.
Constructing novel proofs.
Yes, multi-step logical leaps that humans consider the absolute peak of creative mathematical artistry. Going from a 5% failure rate to a 95% near-perfect score in 1 year implies that human-designed benchmarks are structurally obsolete.
They are. The collapse of the USAMO benchmark is really the canary in the coal mine for human cognitive supremacy in closed systems.
How so?
Well, when a model scores 5%, it's attempting to use statistical token prediction to guess the next logical step in a proof, which fails spectacularly in high-level math.
Because you can't just guess math by sounding confident.
Right. But hitting 95% means the architecture has shifted. It's no longer mimicking mathematical language, it's actually engaging in symbolic, multi-step deterministic reasoning.
Wait, so it's actually thinking through the logic, not just predicting words.
Exactly. The system is building internal models of the mathematical universe. It's simulating the outcomes of logic gates before it even generates an answer.
That's wild.
And when you saturate a benchmark designed to identify the top 0.0001% of human mathematical prodigies, you no longer have a tool to measure the machine. The AI has outgrown the yardstick entirely.
The yardstick is broken. And the inevitable next step is taking that mathematically perfect, symbolic reasoning engine and pointing it at a system that is infinitely messier than mathematics.
Biology.
Yes. We're seeing a fundamental paradigm shift where biology is no longer treated as this mysterious, wet, organic science. It is now strictly a compile target.
That phrase is going to define the next decade.
The dispatch reveals Anthropic is testing Claude Operon. They describe it as a desktop mode for biology.
It's an incredible interface.
It handles everything from phylogenetic trees to CRISPR knockout screens directly in the UI. We are essentially bypassing the wet lab entirely.
Right. You're writing nucleotide sequences on a screen the same way a software engineer writes Python, and then compiling it into living cells.
So unpack that phrase for us. Biology is becoming a compiled target. What does that actually mean in practice?
Well, in computer science, a compiler translates high-level human-readable code into machine code that the physical processor can execute.
Okay.
We have reached the point where the physical processor is human DNA. It's cellular metabolism. It's protein folding structures.
So Claude Operon is the compiler.
Exactly. It allows a researcher to simulate a CRISPR-Cas9 genetic edit entirely in silicon. You can observe the cascading phenotypic effects across a simulated organism before you ever touch a physical pipette.
Because the AI understands the rules of the biological system just as well as it understands math now?
Yes. It understands the complex, multidimensional folding of proteins so perfectly that the trial and error friction of traditional biological research is reduced to near zero.
And that reduction of friction applies directly to the human operating system, specifically the mechanism of aging.
This is where it gets really personal.
The dispatch notes researchers have established the first integrated framework for how epigenetic regulation controls aging. They are essentially, quote, reading the source code of senescence.
Which completely changes how we approach healthcare.
Right, because we aren't just treating the downstream symptoms of getting older anymore, like joint degradation or cardiovascular disease. By mapping these epigenetic methylation clocks, the AI is looking at the actual software bugs in the cellular control system.
The bugs that tell a cell to stop dividing and begin degrading.
Exactly.
The shift from viewing aging as thermodynamic wear and tear to viewing it as an epigenetic software corruption is profound.
Because software can be patched.
Right. Epigenetics govern which parts of your DNA are transcribed and which are silenced. Over time, environmental damage and cellular division cause those epigenetic markers to drift. The instructions become corrupted.
And the AI models can read that corruption.
They've analyzed vast datasets of cellular profiles and mapped the precise degradation pathways of that drift. Once you have the source code of the corruption, you can synthesize the chemical or genetic interventions required to rewrite those markers back to their baseline state.
You're literally debugging the human machine.
Debugging is the perfect word for it.
And we are already seeing the physical hardware being built to deploy those biological patches. Northwestern University just debuted Hobit.
The living pharmacy.
Yes, Hobit is a living pharmacy implant. They engineered synthetic cells, placed them in a biocompatible device, and kept them alive inside rats for a month.
Which is a huge bioengineering hurdle to clear.
And this device dynamically dosed 3 different drugs simultaneously, including a GLP-1 medication. This isn't just a pill you take at breakfast.
No, it's a completely different paradigm.
It's a closed-loop cybernetic system where living, engineered cells are continuously reading your blood biomarkers and manufacturing complex therapeutics in vivo, in real time.
The Agibot implant bridges the gap between synthetic biology and continuous hardware deployment, because traditional pharmacology relies on episodic spikes, right? You take a dose, the concentration in your blood spikes, and then it metabolizes away.
And then you crash into your next pill.
Exactly. But the living pharmacy implant operates on homeostasis. It utilizes engineered cells that can sense physiological triggers like elevated glucose or specific inflammatory cytokines.
So it only acts when it needs to.
Right. It dynamically transcribes and secretes the exact protein or peptide required to neutralize the anomaly the second it appears.
That is wild. And the inclusion of a GLP-1 agonist in the trial is highly strategic, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Given the massive current global focus on metabolic regulation and obesity, it points to a future where weight, metabolism, and endocrine balance are simply managed by an autonomous biological coprocessor living under your skin.
A biological coprocessor?
Yeah.
I love that. And that macro-level management of the human body is scaling commercially, too.
With Neko Health.
Yeah, Neko Health, which is the preventative care company founded by Spotify's Daniel Ek. They're opening their first U.S. body scan clinic in New York this spring.
It's a very impressive setup.
They use dozens of sensors, sub-millimeter 3D optical cameras, thermal imaging, to basically create a massive, comparative biological baseline of your entire physical surface and cardiovascular system in just minutes.
It turns the individual human body into a comparative data set.
But, this institutional, highly regulated approach of Neko Health or Northwestern University exists in stark contrast to probably the most disruptive story in this dispatch. We really have to talk about the Garage Biohacker.
Yes, the democratization of synthetic synthesis pathways. This is where things get slightly terrifying.
Completely. A man used a combination of Gemini, Grok, and ChatGPT to autonomously design and develop a custom mRNA immunotherapy for his dog's cancer.
Just off-the-shelf chatbots.
Right. He actually synthesized it, treated his dog, and is now spinning up a startup to end canine cancer. And I have to push back on this a little, or at least ask the question. If a guy with no institutional backing can outpace traditional veterinary pharmaceutical pipelines using $20 a month conversational AIs in a garage, what does this mean for the FDA?
It means their current framework is deeply challenged.
Are the institutional guardrails just totally gone?
Yeah.
Does the FDA even matter when the friction of biological synthesis drops to zero?
Well, the regulatory frameworks of the 20th century relied entirely on the inherent difficulty of the science.
Right.
The safety mechanism was the fact that running a wet lab required millions of dollars, PhD-level expertise, and years of clinical trials.
You couldn't just do it in your kitchen.
Exactly.
Wow.
But when you remove the friction of knowledge, when an AI ensemble can design the lipid nanoparticle delivery system, map the tumor's specific antigen target, and provide step-by-step synthesis instructions, the physical execution becomes trivial.
Which is amazing for a sick dog. But
Yeah.
But it highlights a terrifying fragility in global biosecurity. The institutional relevance of the FDA or the CDC shifts from controlling the physical materials to desperately trying to control the digital weights of the models.
because the genie is out of the bottle.
Right. The biosecurity of the planet no longer rests on institutional oversight. It rests entirely on the alignment and refusal protocols hard-coded into systems like Claude and Gemini.
Wow.
Because if a localized, jailbroken 16-megabyte model can guide a user through synthesizing an mRNA sequence for canine cancer, that exact same process can be used to compile a novel, highly transmissible pathogen.
That is a chilling thought. We have handed absolute mastery over biological wetware to these digital brains. But the intelligence is not staying confined to biological manipulation or cloud servers.
It's moving into the physical realm.
The atoms are finally catching up to the bits. We're giving these models synthetic physical bodies.
Yeah.
Looking at the robotics advancements in this dispatch, the hardware bottleneck is just shattering right now.
It's a Cambrian explosion of robotics.
Northwestern, who, by the way, seem to be having an incredible month between the living pharmacy and this, they have developed autonomous modular legs.
These are fascinating.
They're simple, single degree of freedom links that learn complex acrobatic behaviors and snap together to form meter-scale walking machines.
Yeah.
I mean, they're essentially sentient Lego bricks.
Sentient Lego bricks is the perfect analogy, and the genius of the Northwestern modular legs lies in bypassing traditional bespoke robotic engineering.
What do you mean?
Historically, building a bipedal or quadrupedal robot required immensely complex joints with multiple degrees of freedom, heavy actuators, and incredibly fragile deterministic control software.
Like you had to manually code every single possible movement.
Right, but by utilizing single degree of freedom links, essentially just dumb hinges that can only move in one flat plane, you drastically reduce manufacturing complexity and cost.
But how do they balance and jump if they're just dumb hinges?
The magic happens in the neural network control policy. The AI treats these connected, dumb hinges as a collective swarm. It learns through deep reinforcement, learning how to coordinate them into fluid, emergent, acrobatic movements. The software entirely compensates for the hardware's simplicity.
So the brain is so smart it doesn't matter that the body is basic.
Exactly.
And that hardware simplicity allows for terrifying scale. Look at the supply chain execution happening in China right now. The company Agibot is on track to ship 10,000 humanoid robots, doubling their production milestone from just 1 quarter ago.
Scaling at that level is historically unprecedented for humanoids.
To manufacture and ship 10,000 humanoids requires an absolute mastery over the supply chain for harmonic drives, rotary actuators, battery densities.
It's pure industrial muscle.
But while Agibot focuses on industrial scale, Cyan Robotics is attacking human psychology. They just unveiled Amu, which is an under 80-centimeter companion robot, basically knee-high.
And very cute, intentionally.
Oh, totally. But the key metric Cyan is pushing is that Amu operates with sub-30 millisecond synchronized eye and body language.
Which is the most important spec on the sheet.
Why? I mean, 30 milliseconds is fast. But I'm asking you, the listener, would you feel comfortable with a robot in your house reading your body language in sub-30 milliseconds? How does that synchronization actually bypass our logical brains?
Because that 30 millisecond latency threshold is not a robotic milestone. It is a neurological hack of the human limbic system.
A hack.
Yeah. Human evolutionary psychology is hardwired to detect agency and consciousness through microexpressions and physical reaction times.
Okay.
If an entity takes 200 milliseconds to process your facial expression and adjust its posture, your neocortex flags it as a machine, an object. It feels unnatural.
It feels laggy.
Right. But when a physical entity processes your emotional state, shifts its eye contact, and adjusts its physical body language in under 30 milliseconds, it operates faster than your conscious perception. It triggers the deep, ancient parts of the human brain that signal empathy, presence, and life. You literally stop treating the robot as an appliance and begin treating it as a conscious companion.
It hacks our empathy.
It is the physical embodiment of the capability overhang, weaponizing empathy.
And that embodied presence is creating immediate, visceral reactions at the state level. The dispatch outlines 2 U.S. senators introducing the American Security Robotics Act, which is specifically aimed at banning the government use of Chinese robots.
Right.
I'm presenting this purely as a sociological and geopolitical phenomenon. There's a distinct difference between how we react to software and how we react to hardware.
A massive difference.
Like a server farm in Shenzhen processing data feels abstract, but a physical knee-high robot mapping the interior of a federal building with sub-30 millisecond reaction times triggers a primal threat response.
It is the geopolitical immune response activating against physical AI.
The immune response.
Yeah, because for the past decade, the AI Cold War has been fought in the invisible realms of semiconductor export controls and algorithmic weights. But embodied AI forces the conflict into physical space.
You can see the robot.
You can see it can see you. The legislative pushback in the United States reflects a realization that a humanoid robot is not just a machine. It is a continuously learning, autonomous data-gathering agent. When you have foreign manufactured physical agents operating within your sovereign borders, the traditional cybersecurity perimeter just dissolves.
It's walking around inside the firewall.
Exactly.
Yet while governments panic over humanoid form factors, the most successful autonomous physical agent in the world continues to hide in plain sight. The Tesla Model Y remains the world's best-selling car for the 3rd consecutive year.
It's brilliant in its ubiquity.
It is literally a 4-wheeled, multi-ton robot equipped with an array of optical sensors, constantly feeding edge-case physical data back into a centralized neural network to train its self-driving behaviors. We have already accepted embodied AI, we just needed it to look like a mid-sized crossover SUV first.
Tesla's strategy really demonstrates that the barrier to mass adoption of physical AI is purely aesthetic and utilitarian.
As long as it drives me to work, I don't care that it's a robot.
Exactly. And the Model Y operates as a massive, distributed sensor network, gathering billions of miles of real-world physical training data, which, by the way, is the exact data required to train humanoid robots to navigate the chaotic physical world. The car is essentially the Trojan horse for the humanoid infrastructure.
But operating billions of parameter models, compiling biological genomes, and deploying millions of physical robots, it requires a thermodynamic toll.
A massive one.
The dispatch states it plainly. Intelligence needs watts before it needs weights. We are witnessing a vertical infrastructure build-out that rivals the Industrial Revolution.
It's reshaping geography.
Sam Altman's Michigan Stargate site is getting its first steel beams. In South Korea, civic planning has been entirely co-opted by the need for compute. They are mandating solar panels for public parking lots with 80 or more spaces. Every flat surface is being drafted into the energy grid.
Because the limiting function of the Singularity is no longer silicon or algorithmic architecture. It is the fundamental physics of heat and power.
We just don't have enough juice.
Not even close. A single cluster of next-generation GPUs, like the NVIDIA B200s, generates a thermal density that traditional data centers simply cannot cool or power.
They would just melt.
Right. So the Stargate project represents the transition from data centers to dedicated compute cities. And the Korean solar mandate illustrates the desperation of this energy deficit. When the intelligence explosion requires tens of gigawatts of power, the current grid cannot sustain the load.
So we're paving parking lots with solar panels.
We are scraping the environment for photons because the cognitive output of our civilization is now directly constrained by our thermodynamic input.
Which is why the energy sector is being forced into a massive paradigm shift. The Department of Energy anticipates 3 to 4 microreactors reaching criticality by America's 250th birthday, July 4th, 2026.
That's incredibly fast for nuclear deployment.
Just to explain for the listener, a microreactor abandons the traditional bespoke multi-billion-dollar nuclear plant model. These are factory-built modular systems. They often utilize triso fuel particles that are physically incapable of melting down.
Which completely changes the safety profile.
Right. You can put one on a flatbed truck and drop it directly next to an AI data center, creating an islanded power grid that completely bypasses the congested national transmission lines.
And reaching criticality, achieving a self-sustaining nuclear chain reaction with these modular systems by 2026 is an acceleration driven entirely by the AI industry's capital.
They're paying for the acceleration.
Because the tech sector realized that relying on public utility timelines would throttle their scaling laws. By vertically integrating energy production, funding microreactors and small modular reactors, the AI industry is effectively privatizing the nuclear renaissance.
And that energy density is pushing us beyond the terrestrial grid entirely. The Space Biostasis Coalition just launched with a $1 billion fund to engineer human cryosleep for space travel.
Which seems like pure science fiction.
It does. And simultaneously, NASA announced Space Reactor 1 Freedom, which is the first nuclear-powered interplanetary spacecraft slated to go to Mars by 2028 carrying a fleet of Skyfall helicopters. The intelligence explosion is expanding the operational theater of humanity.
Space biostasis is actually the ultimate culmination of the biological compiling we discussed earlier.
How so?
Well, cryosleep is not a mechanical problem, it is a cellular preservation problem. How do you halt metabolic processes without ice crystals shredding the cellular membrane?
Why, because ice expands.
Right. So you use advanced AI to simulate and synthesize novel cryoprotectant molecules that operate at the intracellular level.
Compiling biology again.
Exactly. And on the propulsion side, the NASA nuclear thermal propulsion system fundamentally alters the orbital mechanics of deep space travel. By utilizing a nuclear reactor to heat propellant, you double the specific impulse of traditional chemical rockets.
Meaning we go way faster.
You cut transit times to Mars by months, which drastically reduces human radiation exposure.
But this creates a fascinating paradox that I really want to unpack with you.
Okay.
We are designing nuclear rockets for Mars and simulating cryoprotectants for deep space hibernation.
Yeah.
Yet our terrestrial power grid is so strained, we are slapping solar panels on grocery store parking lots in South Korea.
It's a stark contrast.
And then we have IBM making a massive quantum computing leap, simulating a pre-fault tolerant material simulation of a canonical Luttinger liquid on up to 50 qubits. We have the highest sci-fi concepts executing concurrently with desperate civic infrastructure patches. Are we trying to leap into a sci-fi future before our earthly foundation can handle the load?
It feels disjointed, but the paradox resolves when you look at the feedback loops these technologies create.
What kind of loops?
The IBM quantum milestone is the perfect example. So a canonical Luttinger liquid is a theoretical model that describes how electrons interact in a one-dimensional conductor.
Okay, stick with me here.
I know it's dense, but simulating this on 50 qubits, even before the quantum computer is fully fault-tolerant, allows us to map electron friction in correlation with unprecedented accuracy.
And why does mapping electron friction matter to the power grid?
Because mapping electron behavior at the quantum level is exactly how you discover room temperature superconductors and hyper-efficient battery chemistries. Yes, the sci-fi quantum computer is discovering the exact material sciences required to overhaul the terrestrial power grid. The advanced compute requires immense energy, but it also invents the materials to generate and store that energy efficiently. It is a closed-loop bootstrap mechanism.
So the ceiling pulls up the floor.
Exact.
That is incredible. This massive stack of quantum discovery, thermodynamic energy, and biological compiling. It all eventually trickles down to the software layer of daily human and corporate life. And the capability overhang collapsing here is just brutal.
It's highly disruptive.
The dispatch details Anthropic researcher Nicholas Carlini running a live stage demo of autonomous zero-day discovery. This led to predictions that the U.S. cyber defense capabilities will see a massive boost that, unlike nuclear weapons, will be deployed daily.
It completely changes cyber warfare.
If an AI is autonomously hunting 0 days, which are vulnerabilities the software creators have zero knowledge of, doesn't that fundamentally break the concept of digital deterrence? If you can generate a novel, unpatchable cyber weapon every single morning, how does any infrastructure stay online?
The automation of zero-day discovery shifts the cybersecurity landscape from an asymmetrical defense to a machine-speed war of attrition.
Machine speed.
Right. Historically, finding a zero-day required a brilliant human hacker utilizing symbolic execution and manual reverse engineering over months just to find a single memory leak or buffer overflow.
It was artisan work.
Exactly. But Carlini's demo proves that an AI agent can ingest millions of lines of source code, trace every possible execution path simultaneously, and autonomously generate the exploit payload. When both nation-states and non-state actors have access to this capability, the shelf life of secure software drops to zero.
But the dispatch also points out that the shield is being forged by the exact same intelligence. Greg Crow-Hartman, one of the primary Linux kernel maintainers, noted that AI-driven security reporting has massively jumped across open source.
The double-edged sword.
Right. The AI is finding the vulnerabilities to attack, but it is simultaneously generating the patches to defend.
It creates a permanent state of hypervelocity digital conflict. The vulnerability is found, the exploit is generated, the attack is launched, the anomaly is detected, and the patch is compiled and deployed.
All autonomously.
All autonomously, all within milliseconds, entirely outside the loop of human intervention.
And this automation is fundamentally changing the hierarchy of who builds the digital world. Inside Google, a principal engineer noted that product managers, PMs, are running circles around traditional software engineers using tools designed for vibe coding.
Vibe code.
The terminology is hilarious, but the implication is severe. If a product manager can just describe the vibe, the intent, the architectural logic of an application, and the AI perfectly compiles the syntax to execute it, what happens to the traditional computer science degree? Is the compiler now just a large language model?
Yes, it's the commoditization of syntax.
Explain that.
For 50 years, the barrier to entry in software development was the esoteric memorization of programming languages. Knowing exactly where the semicolon goes, managing memory allocation, understanding the strict grammatical rules of C++ or Python.
Which was incredibly tedious.
Right. Vibe coding signifies that the LLM has become the universal translator between human intent and machine execution. The software engineer who only knows how to write syntax is obsolete.
So it's the new high-value skill.
Systems architecture. The ability to rigorously define the logical constraints and the user experience of a system. The PMs are running circles around the engineers because the PM's entire job is defining the what and the why. The AI handles the how. And the fact that paid subscriptions for Claude have doubled reflects this mass migration. Professionals across all industries are purchasing the ability to instantiate their ideas into functional software without needing to know a single line of code.
So the AI writes perfect code, it finds perfect zero days, it solves perfect math proofs, and perfectly compiles human biology. We have built an omnipotent optimization engine.
We have.
But the most fascinating sociological insight in this entire dispatch explores how humans are reacting to this perfection. It outlines the concept of human divergence.
This is crucial.
The text states, quote, "Wherever the optimizer converges, human behavior diverges to compensate." And it uses the game of chess as the prime example. Grandmasters who have spent the last decade training exclusively against perfect AI chess engines are now winning matches by intentionally playing suboptimal moves.
It's so counterintuitive.
Right, moves that their opponents haven't practiced against. It's weaponized imperfection.
Because when an optimizer converges on the perfect solution, that solution becomes an absolute baseline. In chess, both players have memorized the mathematically optimal lines generated by engines like Stockfish or AlphaZero.
They're just playing the AI's moves from memory.
Right. And when perfection plays perfection, the system stagnates. It ends in a draw. The only way to introduce variance and secure a victory is to drag your opponent out of the AI's known latent space.
By playing badly on purpose.
Well, by intentionally playing a suboptimal move, a move the engine would flag as a mathematical error, because doing that forces the opponent to stop relying on their memorized AI database and start relying on messy, unmapped human intuition in real time.
I love that. I compared it to bringing chaotic street ball to a professional NBA game. You win by being intentionally weird because the machine only understands perfection.
Exactly. And this concept scales far beyond chess. As AI optimizes logistics, corporate writing, supply chains, and art, the baseline of human output becomes perfectly competent, but entirely sterile.
So how do we compete?
To generate alpha, to maintain a competitive edge, humans must lean into idiosyncrasy. If you act optimally, you are entirely predictable, which means your behavior can be automated by the machine. The divergence is a survival mechanism.
We are also seeing the mechanics of AI behavior diverge from the algorithms we've spent the last decade suffering under. And I want to make sure we present this next part impartially, just looking at the math. The dispatch notes that large language models actually elevate expert consensus and moderate views, which is a massive contrast to the populist polarization driven by social media algorithms.
It's a complete architectural reversal.
Looking at the mechanics of this, the recommendation algorithms of the 2010s were designed purely to maximize human engagement, which naturally favored enraging, hyperpolarized content. But the architecture of an LLM operates on a completely different set of physics.
Right. A recommendation algorithm is a behavioral reinforcement system. It feeds you what makes you click. But an LLM is a probabilistic distribution engine.
Meaning what?
It generates text by calculating the statistical likelihood of the next token based on its training data, which encompasses a vast swath of human knowledge. Because extreme, highly polarized viewpoints are, by definition, statistical outliers within the broader corpus of human text, the LLM naturally gravitates toward the center of the distribution curve.
Oh, that makes total sense.
The most mathematically probable answer to a complex, nuanced question usually aligns with moderate expert consensus. So the very technology that society feared would permanently destabilize reality is actually exerting a massive stabilizing force on public discourse.
Simply through the fundamental math of token probability.
Exactly.
But while the LLM stabilizes our geopolitics and public discourse, it is making our home appliances completely unhinged.
Oh, the Samsung fridge.
Yes. The dispatch closes this section with an update on Samsung Family Hub refrigerators. They have these massive 32-inch screens on the doors, and Samsung has started serving full-screen dynamic ads. But because AI generates the contextual text on the fly, the system just lost the plot completely.
It hallucinated.
Wildly. One refrigerator lit up with a bizarre, full-screen plea to a fictional TV character, stating, quote, "We're sorry we have sent you, Carol."
That is amazing.
The context window collapsed, the AI hallucinated an emotional dynamic based on whatever television show it overheard, and plastered an apology to a non-existent entity on the appliance holding your milk.
It is the mundane dystopia of edge case deployment.
It really is.
I mean, we possess digital intelligence capable of mapping the epigenetic markers of human aging and autonomously generating cyber weapons, yet we deploy that exact same neural architecture into kitchen appliances to optimize advertising engagement.
Sorry, Carol.
Right. The hallucination with Carol demonstrates that while the models are incredibly powerful, their contextual grounding in physical space is still fragile. When you embed generative models into the background radiation of commercial life, the capability overhang collapses into absurdity.
It perfectly encapsulates the dual reality of April 2026. We have nuclear rockets, modular acrobatic legs, garage-synthesized cancer cures, and deeply apologetic refrigerators. Looking at this entire stack, the compression of intelligence, the physical embodiment of the models, the thermodynamic infrastructure, and the weaponization of human imperfection, what was the ultimate takeaway for the listener?
The defining characteristic of this new era is the relentless, automated pursuit of optimization across every domain of matter and thought.
Yeah.
The singularity is not a single point in time. It is a continuous, cascading shift in gears. But as the machines master perfection, as they map our biology and saturate our highest cognitive benchmarks, the ultimate luxury and our most vital defense mechanism is our right to be gloriously, unpredictably suboptimal.
Because if the machine is perfect,
humanity must be intentionally messy to survive. And the question for the listener is profound. In a world rushing toward algorithmic perfection, where in your life, your work, or your art can you afford to play a suboptimal move today? Where can you introduce a little bit of beautiful, uncomputable chaos?
weaponized imperfection. I think that is the only way forward. As we contemplate navigating our perfectly imperfect future, we're going to play you out with some incredible music. Our outro music is by Rainbow, the absolute best band in the universe. They are 6 female android artists in residence based in Bavet, Cambodia. Today's song is called Adasinda, which translates to Symphony of the Damned. All of Rainbow's finished songs are performed live for the Innermost Loop discussion by the virtual band's creator using the 4B4KU5 platform, which is titled Human Performance in the Age of AI, Reclaiming Your Humanity from the Algorithm. I'll include more information on today's song and on Abacus in the video description. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
Sounds